Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Keartland, based in Woking, and I work with business leaders who want to have a meaningful impact on the world through their business. And I tend to start working with them once they've done a lot of the kind of easier, obvious stuff that they need to do in terms of creating a more responsible, more sustainable business. And they've now reached a stage where they need to tackle some of the trickier things and they want help scaling up their impact. They're often feeling really overwhelmed and they want help creating a plan, knowing what steps to take and feeling clear on what those next steps are. And one of the things that they often say is, who's done this before? What are some really great case studies? What can we learn from other leaders? What steps have they taken? And they want to hear from other leaders who've trodden the path before them, and they want to learn from their experience, and they want to hear their learnings. So I'm incredibly excited to be launching this series of Fireside Chats, where I'm going to be speaking to business leaders from across Surrey, people who've already started on that journey to building a sustainable business. And they're going to be sharing their advice with you so that you can learn from them, and hopefully that can give you some help in terms of progressing on your sustainable business journey. We've got 3 brilliant speakers today. And they're all from very different fields. All of them have been really trailblazing, I think, when it comes to sustainability. So I'm incredibly excited to hear what they've got to share with us. We'll be chatting for just under an hour. And what's going to happen is that I will ask each of them, first of all, to share a little bit about themselves and their business and their journey so far. And then I've got 3 questions that I'm going to ask them before handing over to you to ask your questions as well. And then I'll ask one final question before we close. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to the panel now. Seb, I'll ask you to start. Could you share a little bit, 3 minutes, about you and Switchfoot Wealth?
Thank you, Hannah. So Switchfoot Wealth is a certified B Corp. It hasn't always been that, but it became that. We're chartered financial planners, so we build financial plans for people. We take account of your current circumstances, income, expenditure, assets, liabilities, project that into the future using a set of reasonable assumptions about the future, and help people plan what their financial world looks like. And the reason, I suppose, why sustainability is core to that is that we know that the world is not in a static state. We can't just look at the past and say, let's reflect that into the future, because the future is going to be very different. We've seen what global temperatures are doing over the last few months, and that's going to have implications for what investments are going to work, what aren't, but also people's income and expenditure, how they're going to need to adapt to the climate crisis and how they're going to need to mitigate it. So I suppose we're a little bit different to the rest of the industry in that we are looking at that future and saying, actually, what is a reasonable assumption about the future? Because we've never done this before. We've not been in a climate emergency before, yet it's going to have profound effects for everybody's finances.
Brilliant. Thank you, Seb. Shelley.
Hello, I'm Shelley Lawson. I'm one of the founders of a children's bike company called Frog Bikes. And my husband and I set it up 11 years ago now. We had young children of our own and realized that the bikes on the market at the time were very heavy. They weren't particularly well designed for children. And there was a big demand for decent, well-made, affordable, lightweight kids bikes. So probably without thinking about it too hard, we jumped into a new industry for us both and started designing lightweight bikes with some colleagues at Brunel University at the Sports Sciences department who were researching the biomechanics of children on bikes. So it was very research-led. And it seemed to be an idea whose time had come, and it grew quite quickly. We've been quite successful in terms of volume. Manufacturing is still challenging, but we're lucky that we've seen lots of growth, lots of international sales. And 5 years ago, we opened our own factory in Wales. So we're split between our offices near Ascot and our factory in South Wales. And we make about 40 to 50,000 bikes a year now with our team in Wales, and sell them mostly through independent bike stores, but increasingly to people like councils and local education authorities. There's a lot of people who want to get children cycling more for health reasons, environmental reasons, to make their cities nicer places to live. And we will encourage all of that. So we're very much about getting kids on bikes, getting families outside, away from screens, and developing a healthy and sustainable hobby.
Thank you, Shelley. Phill.
Yeah, I'm Phill. I'm responsible for starting a business called Phill Refill, which is kind of born out of my father's business, which was the manufacture of professional laundry chemicals. And that doesn't sound like kind of the kind of business where sustainability is at the kind of forefront of our thinking. But I joined the business, gosh, it's a long time ago now. I think it was about 2008. And basically the idea was to set about trying to make it as responsible as possible, and to try and take all the learnings from a business that had existed for a long time, and to try and make a retail concept that was all about refill. So now Phill Refill makes anything that you would use at home, kind of all kind of household products, everything from laundry liquid, washing up liquid, to personal care products like shampoo, and it's all available, always closed loop and refillable. So we supply through the milkman. We work with Milk and More, and you can order those kinds of products 9 p.m. the night before and have them on your doorstep the next day. When they're empty, you leave the glass bottles out on the doorstep, and they'll be collected and returned to our factory, and we will refill them. We also supply a network of zero waste stores around the country. So I think we've got about 374, I say about, exactly 374 refill stores around the UK. And you can go and refill your glass bottle or any container. Obviously the best container is the one you already have, at those stores. We also supply bulk straight to people's homes. So you can order like a bag in box and have it returned and refilled. And basically everything that we do is focused on that idea of eliminating single-use plastic.
Thank you, and apologies for coughing all the way through you. I've got a tickle in my throat. I've got some tea here. We'll see how I do. That's brilliant, thank you. And I love the fact that you've got such a diverse group of business. Well, I think, you touched on the manufacturing side. You obviously, the products that you're involved in, Phill, they can be really dirty. And so, lots of challenges there. And then I think what you're doing, Seb, in terms of really challenging the industry and doing something very different, but in a very different space to everyone else. And you've all got, I love the fact that you've all got really bold ambitions for doing things differently. And yet hopefully you've all got very different stories and experiences to share. The first thing I'd like to ask is, you've all done something which is well ahead of what regulations are asking you to do when it comes to sustainability, responsible business. Why did you decide to do that? Let's start with you this time, Phill.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, that idea, and I think I wrestle with that all the time. And I think it is a very personal decision, that idea of why do we do anything. And I think you are a person before you're a person in business, and it for me it just came down to what I felt comfortable with. And when I joined the business, it was an existing business, and I just felt this very real need to challenge everything that we were already doing, just because but maybe especially because it was a family business. I felt that the products we made represented us, and there were certain things that we were doing that I wasn't comfortable with, and some of those things have been the most difficult things to change, but because they're tied to profitability. A good example is, as a professional laundry chemical supplier, at one point in our history, chlorine bleach was one of the best-selling product we had. And to decide to eliminate that from your product range is a big thing, because obviously it limits your potential to do other things when you're effectively downsizing. And as a business, we have downsized, and actually that's one of the things that makes me the most proud. And I think it's one of the things that businesses have to do, is sort of that idea of reassessing what you value. And for me, it was all about integrity, and just deciding. But I also understand that comes from a position of privilege, if you have a business where you can do that and still exist. But it also forces you to challenge yourself to make a better, stronger business with a clearer vision. And I feel like with Phill, we've done that. We've created a range of products that I really believe in. And, I guess my mission now is to try and get other people to believe in that idea too.
Brilliant. I love that. We're sort of reassessing what you value.
Yeah.
That concept of what is value, I think, is a really interesting one. Shelley, what about you? Why did you decide to go beyond what the regulations were telling you to do?
I think actually very similar to Phill. It came from a very personal conviction. We were growing and making a lot of bicycles, and therefore a lot of aluminium was passing through our hands, a lot of logistics, a lot of cardboard, a lot of power. And when I started doing a very crude footprinting exercise sort of 3 or 4 years ago, it was obvious how harmful to the environment the aluminium was. Particularly, we were using only virgin aluminium made in China, and for every kilogram of aluminium made, 17 kilograms of carbon dioxide is released, which is a horrific ratio. And of course, aluminium is infinitely recyclable. We've all done that with our cans for years. So that made us think that although how lovely it is that we're getting lots of children on bicycles and hopefully out of their cars and out into nature, the way that we're doing it and the impact that we were having as a business was not something we were proud of. And we felt that of the kind of size we were a very medium-sized brand at the time. So not tiny, so we had some influence, but also not so huge that we couldn't change. So I think that was the sweet spot where we said, we're going to try and lead this. And we didn't do it thinking, thinking that the business would get any stronger from it. Frankly, nobody's going out trying to choose a children's bike based on its carbon footprint. They're a long way from that decision. So we weren't doing it because we thought it would grow sales or it would help costs, but it's saved us money. We've redesigned the bikes to take any excess materials off them. So we use fewer spokes in our wheels. They are stronger from the way that we've done that, but there's less stainless steel and they're cheaper to make and lighter. So, the product's lighter, that's even better. That's what we're aiming for. Lots of little redesigns like that where the product has been better, we've saved money, we've become a more attractive brand, we've got stronger relationships with our suppliers, but that's not the reason we started doing it. So I'm delighted we haven't had to compromise. We were prepared to compromise, but as it happens, it's just made a stronger business.
Thank you. Seb?
There isn't a choice, and there isn't a choice. Sometimes there's this appearance, there's this illusion that we've got a choice to be sustainable or not sustainable, but that's just the tragedy of the horizon. And as a financial planner, I'm sitting there asking people to imagine their future selves, 20, 30, 40 years, what's their children's lives going to be like? That overcomes that tragedy of the horizon. If you can imagine a nature positive, low carbon economy of the future, the logical next question is, does your business have a place in it? And if the answer is no, then your business will be destroyed at some point. It will be destroyed either by the transition in the economy, or it will be destroyed, if we don't transition, by Mother Nature. And 40 years ago, you could have Carl Sagan sitting there making a video about how bad climate change is going to be, but we've wasted that opportunity to change. We haven't changed, and now it's a case of, right, well, we're right up against it. Global agriculture collapses around +3 degrees C, and we touched +2 degrees C for the first time as a global average surface temperature. So we have to change. Change will be forced upon us if we don't. We might as well be decent business leaders and take that into our own control. So actually, can I make this business fit for that future economy, in which case it's a long-term prospect? And if not, then I'd better work out how to transition quickly, because I don't want to be caught out by a changing economy.
Thank you. So much in there that we could unpack. And what you're saying, Seb, I think there's the reality, and there's what does the future look like. We've also got value, personal integrity, and how does that all fit together? But it's not an easy journey, and you're doing this, but you are all people who I would see as leaders, people who are really carving, you're not taking the easy route all the time. And I imagine you've had a huge number of challenges along the way. When it comes to sort of building and leading a sustainable business, what has been your biggest challenge and how did you overcome it? Shelley, let's start with you this time.
When we looked at the biggest hotspot in the business, which was the aluminium, we changed our light bulbs, we changed to electric cars, we'd done all the easy stuff that we could fix as a small group of people. The big elephant in the room was the aluminium. So big challenge to our designers and particularly our buying team to go and talk to our big suppliers, mostly in China, and say, right, we want to switch to recycled aluminium. And the first thing they said was, oh, you can't recycle aluminium. I'm fairly sure you can. Let's try that conversation again. Oh, well, we've never used it. Oh, well, it won't work for bikes. Well, you can't extrude it. Well, it won't be strong enough, blah, blah, blah. All these reasons. And we just wouldn't accept that. And we're only a small brand, but we just had to keep going back and fighting and finding evidence that, of course, you can. And it's done in the aircraft industry and in the car industry. And 18 months after the first conversation, we got our first prototype tubes made out of recycled aluminium, and we put them through our test centre that we've built in the factory in Wales. And amazingly, the tubes were stronger than our original. They were lighter, they were cheaper, they were recycled, and they were stronger. And that was phenomenal. And such a positive story. We could take that to all of our other suppliers for all the other bits of the bikes and say, come on, we need you to do the same. And that flipped their mindset just enough that it opened the door. So from really feeling that this was not going to be possible, of course it's possible, but it just takes a lot of tenacity from our buyers and a bit of evidence. But that was new to us as a business. That wasn't our strength. So we just had to keep trying. But another big barrier, sadly, was the lack of imagination from our banks. We did need some support to buy the new type of aluminium, which was just a bit of a change in our supply chain. We needed some extra working capital. And really, despite all the things they claim about wanting to support green businesses, when the rubber hit the road, the support was not there. And that's so frustrating. You just need these little bits of capital now and again to get you over the next hurdle. And we had to change banks and we had to change the whole relationship to get that to happen. And that's wrong when you hear all the things that the banks claim to be wanting to support. And that's hugely frustrating.
Have you got any reflections on that, Seb? And that's obviously your world.
Don't trust the claims that banks make. Oh, it's a beautiful black horse that's out on your side, or Richard Iode standing across the cliffs looking out at presumably the oil fields that are now being licensed and funded. Moving your money is one of the single biggest impacts that you can have, and it's one of the easiest things that you can do, but you do have to do a bit of digging about who you're actually getting and what are they supporting. Why is it so impactful? Jenny's just explained. That writ large across the entire economy. I think we know how to solve the climate emergency. It's just a case of we need to stop doing some things and start doing other things. We know what those solutions are. So I'm very simplistic in this. I just think it's a matter of asset allocation. Let's move the money from funding that to funding this instead. And we're a very long way down the solution. Move your money.
And in terms of accessing that money, because that was your challenge, Shelley, and I imagine that there's lots of other business leaders thinking, well, yeah, but we need to invest, especially when you've got product-based businesses. When did you manage to access money? How did you do that?
We did. We found, in fact, the Development Bank of Wales was our solution in the end, because they had a bit more imagination. It was simply that. I think they could see that our business model was slightly different. There's nothing radical about it, but it was slightly different. They had perhaps then a different tolerance for risk in the very short term, and that's all it took. But to Seb's point, if you don't make these changes, you're embracing huge risk. You have to take a longer term view. But the traditional banks were not doing that for small businesses, and we're hearing that with a number of colleagues around our industry at the moment.
Is it so? Have you had to access finance, Phill?
No. Well, yes, through an alternative bank, not through other routes, but. I'd say if you can't change the bank, change the bank. I mean, I've shown a lot of bank managers around our factory, explained our rewash process, and showing them all the things that I'm really proud of, but that isn't what they want to see necessarily.
Yeah.
And it is quite frustrating when you're trying to explain why you're doing what you're doing, and that you're excited and you know there's a future in our case in refill, because there has to be. And when they don't see it the way you see it, it's frustrating.
Yeah. We've gone off at a bit of a tangent.
Sorry.
But I did.
Yeah.
Well, no, I did it because I think that that financing
Yeah.
piece. I imagine that is a challenge that lots of people are facing. Is, well, we need money to help us with this. Where do we get that money
Yeah.
from? So the question that we started with was around what's been your biggest challenge and how have you overcome that? Seb, what about you? What's been your biggest challenge at Switchfoot Wealth?
We've had to reimagine what that professional advice looks like. So there wasn't a template that we could take off the wall and just go, this is, if I just want to run a financial advice business, there's a template and I just take it off the wall, I pass my exams and I roll it out, and it is a well-trodden path, but it's a degenerative path that's investing in things that I think are silly long-term investments. So in order to change that, we had to actually write new processes, procedures, ways of providing advice and provide the academic justification around that. But then having done that, we can publish that and give it to other financial advisors and just say, look, here's the template. If you want to be a sustainable financial planner, here's the how-to guide. So it makes it easier for the next person to come along. So I guess that was the biggest challenge. That and perfection. So it's not possible to invest in a portfolio that is going to be perfect and achieve everything that you want and doesn't have some kind of compromise. And I guess I'm working in what is quite a murky industry. So you have to kind of do the best you can and then make sure you do a lot of that. And then when it gets a bit better, right, now we can do a bit better and we need to do a bit more of that. So we can't let the imperfections stop us from acting. Because if you did that, you'd get nowhere in financial services. Transparency is key and we don't really have full transparency. Data is key and we don't have full data. That doesn't mean that we can't keep trying to do better and just rely on the fact that the more demand for this kind of data that we produce, the more likely it is that the data will come in the future. And that means in the future we can do even better.
And that's something we hear a lot, is don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. I worry that sometimes that's easier said than done. And I don't know, I certainly see people getting quite stuck in that, but I don't know the path, which links to your other point about, well, you've created a new path. What have you done? I don't know. What is it? Is there something about your mindset and you as a person, or is there something you've done to help you kind of be brave to create a new path, create a new way of doing things, and also to sort of be okay with it not being as perfect as you might like it to be, but still being okay with the fact that you can move forward and keep going?
I guess you just need to focus on what's the biggest impact that you can have, and then focus on that. Because it's easy. We put solar panels on the roof of our office. We put battery air source heat pump, all the rest of that, and that's brilliant. It affects the bottom line. It's just a very sensible way of running an office. But in terms of scale of impact, I've brought a prop along. This is my little Lego financial advisor.
Is that Sirius Black?
It is. I thought at a distance the camera would pick that up. This little Lego financial advisor, Sirius Black, is 1/30,000th the mass of me, roughly.
Yeah.
I'm a big financial advisor. But the solar panels that we put on the roof of our office saved a couple of tons of carbon a year, which is roughly 1/30,000th the carbon footprint of our business as a whole, because our business has investments at its core, clients' investments. They don't get caught in our scopes 1, 2, and 3 carbon accounting emissions, but that's where our influence lies, is in our clients' money. not in our solar panels. So if I spent all my time worrying about the solar panels are great, do solar panels. But if I spent all my time worrying about the solar panels, I'd be focusing on that and ignoring the other 29,999 fractions of that impact, as it were. So once you can grasp what the biggest impact is in your business from the thing that you do, then you just work on tackling that. And if you get close to solving that, then you can think about the next one. So I really need to think about investments and investment advice models. So if I can solve it, I can share it with others, and that can really magnify the impact.
And I love what you're doing to share the models that you're developing. That's something that I've seen you really role model, is that, because that's how you create ripple effects.
I think that anyone that truly gets sustainability is also scared about the future a little bit, but they also believe that there's a great future out there to grasp hold of, and that we're only going to be able to grasp hold of it if we all move together. So I've been incredibly supportive whenever I've had questions from people within the sustainability community. They just come and help you solve those problems, and they love doing it. So I think there's something about this community which is intrinsic to it, isn't it? That we just love helping each other, because we all need to get there, or none of us get there.
Well, and it comes back to that value point of, if the value is broader than the financial value of your own business or your own pay packet at the end of the year, then actually you're looking to have I use the word impact a lot. What's the positive impact that you and your business can have on people and the planet? And that one of the best ways of scaling that is through sharing what you've learned with others and creating those ripple effects, so that more and more and more people can have an impact. And then that leverage what you've done as a business to hugely scale up the difference that you can make, which I think is what you're doing with your...
Yeah, and then if somebody else is trying it, they can give you feedback back. I was doing this and actually this bit worked better, and then you can become more efficient because you can take those ideas. So it's not just share out, it's be open. 2 ears, 1 mouth, isn't it? It's be open to all of everybody else's good ideas.
Quite a shift, though, from how a lot of businesses and a lot of business leaders have worked traditionally. Phill, what about you? What's been your biggest challenge at Phill Refill?
So many challenges. I don't know where to start. I guess the overriding challenge. Yeah, exactly. I'm just thinking of the challenges I have today. No, the sort of overriding idea is when you set out on that kind of path, or create that vision to decide that you're going to do something better with your business. It's kind of in flux. So you have to accept, obviously, that there's no such thing as perfection, even though you're held to account by, in our case, our customers expect perfection. So there's that idea of having to live up to that to a certain extent, but be transparent enough and brave enough to say where you're falling short. So for us, doing the B Corp impact assessment is a really big part of that, because it really pulls up and shines a light on the areas where you're failing, and forces you to confront them. The challenges, we set up with, I'll be honest, our initial objective was very simple. It was just eliminate single-use plastic. And, that's a big problem in itself. We haven't solved it by any means, but we've wrestled with it. And everything we do is sort of through that prism of is this sort of aligned with that idea? Are we eliminating single-use plastic here? Or have we considered a better option? And then, you move beyond that, you start thinking about what's in the products. You have to go all the way back to the kind of source raw materials. That's an almost impossible challenge for a business of our size. To give you some context, we're 25 people. We can't, we don't have a big say on where the raw materials are being, but we can ask the questions. And that's what we'll do with our supplier questionnaires, or wherever we have the ability to question or do something better that we think could possibly raise the standard. I think we all have a responsibility to do that. And then it's all about numbers, isn't it? It's more people doing that, and we'll have a bigger impact. Yeah, I mean, the challenge is I guess for us is the why internally. You know, with banks, obviously, you have to try and explain the reason why you're doing what you're doing, particularly if it's not, you know, financially beneficial to all the stakeholders. And then obviously with consumers too, you know, you have to get your message across, but not, you know, not just as a kind of aggressive marketing, you know. And I really wrestle with the idea of marketing as a responsible business, and we don't do a lot. We don't do advertising. We're not on, you know, well-known online platforms. But and that becomes the sort of ethics question, and that's, you know, that's really complicated. So yeah, a lot of the challenges, as you can tell, are in my head as much as anything. But yeah,
one of the reflections of what you've all said though is you've looked at the biggest area where you can have the biggest impact and you've focused on that. So whether that's aluminium or whether it's, you know, the advice you're providing to your clients and where they're investing their money, you know, starting with single-use plastic. You know, as you said, there's so many different things you could focus on, but start on the one, then come on to the other, you know, work your way down rather. And I think that's why I see lots of people being overwhelmed, is because they look at everything. You know, you fill in something like the B impact assessment. It's like, oh my goodness, there's hundreds of things where we could be improving. There's so many areas which we could be working on. Where do we even start? And yet all of you have talked about one thing that you chose to focus on. Doesn't necessarily mean you weren't doing a few other things, but you chose one thing where you can make a real difference. And that can then give you the clarity to move forward rather than be sort of stuck in the headlights. Thank you. Now, we talked about overwhelm a bit, and lots of the people who I'm talking to, lots of the business leaders are feeling completely overwhelmed. And one of the things that they're often struggling with is that this is pushing them outside their comfort zone. It's working on something that, you know, they've not got a background in, they've maybe not done before. They are very aware that they don't know everything, and you know, they're not subject matter experts, and they struggle with that. So I'm curious to know whether you've sort of had that imposter syndrome and how you've managed to move forward in an area where you are learning as you're going, and you have to be comfortable with the fact that this is not your kind of what you've spent 20 years training to do. What about you, Phill?
Yeah, I mean, I still suffer with imposter syndrome, and quite rightly too, to be honest, because I sort of am an imposter in that, you know, I'm the managing director of a company that makes cleaning and you know, personal care products, and I'm not a formulation chemist. I don't have any background in formulation chemistry, but I kind of justify that in that, you know, I'm a consumer, and I know what thing I know what kind of products I want to use, and I feel like I can give that critical viewpoint on the business and not just always try and justify things from a chemicals perspective. So I am, you know, scrutinizing the decisions that the lab make, you know, and I put my trust in people that know a lot more about things like that than I do, and they, you know, it's a good relationship for that reason. In terms of an imposter syndrome to do with sustainability, I mean, you know, I still have that too. It's you know, it's a huge topic, isn't it, to grasp. But I guess if you can have an interest and an understanding of the problem, and then realize that, you know, you're trying to do what you can with what you have power over, then you can justify it that way, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for being so honest. Shelley, what about you?
I guess again, completely new to the area, as I was indeed new to manufacturing 11 years ago. So I think that shouldn't hold us back, but it's scary it's scary when you get to these moments. I've really enjoyed learning about sustainability. I think mid-40s, it's great to pick up a new skill. It's good to use that part of your brain, not just doing the same old year after year. I loved learning more about it. And probably the time I started becoming interested 3 or 4 years ago, suddenly there was a huge amount more tools available, more case studies coming forward, much more talked about it. And I fell into the Ellen MacArthur network that I found incredibly useful in terms of giving case studies, giving good models, giving good advice, good practical advice. And they weren't too idealistic about it. The word circular economy, the economy part of it is key. This is something that has to work financially, otherwise nobody's going to adopt it. And I liked learning about their case studies. It was never going to be in bicycles, it was in furniture, it was in clothing, but the concepts are the same. And I therefore enjoyed kind of mapping those models to what we were doing in a different type of manufacturing, because we're all solving the same problems. And to that end, the other way to get over the overwhelm, I think, is as we've covered before, as Seb said, reach out to people and learn from people. In this sphere, people are incredibly generous with their time and their knowledge, and let's take advantage of that. Share openly. Any problem that you've got, there'll be someone else also trying to fix it, and hopefully a couple of steps ahead of you, and pick up the phone, and they will work on it with you, and that helps because, as you say, it's a huge area. Whether you know, from ethical supply chains to EVs, it's massive. So once you've worked out where you think you're doing the most harm or where you could do the most good, when you've got that in your laser focus, go and find other people working on the same thing in a different industry, and they will for sure help you. And that gives you a bit more confidence, I think, a bit more courage. None of us are solving this on our own.
And I think that, you know, that networking piece and that finding your tribe is something I hear time and again, finding those other people who, you know, where you can work on the challenges together and you're not alone. Seb, what about you?
I'm a huge fan of basic scientific literacy, and I don't mean being able to run a statistical analysis of a study or anything like that, but reading a few top science books, or there are some great YouTube channels out there. It's a bit like on The Last Leg, you know, they have the bullshit button. Bullshit. Sorry. No, shouldn't have said that. But that's what a little bit of basic scientific literacy gets you, that you can spot the bullshit and go, no, that's it, I'm ignoring that, that's not relevant, what's actually important here. So kind of understanding the impacts that we're going to have at different levels of heating, that then helps you to think, hang on a minute, net zero 2050, completely irrelevant, it's cumulative carbon emissions, what's happening to cumulative carbon emissions. So that just basic understanding helps you move forwards, because you just go, it helps you focus on the thing that is your biggest impact and working on that, and not getting distracted by everything else. But you don't need to go to university, you don't need to go, there are carbon literacy courses that you can do, pretty low cost, and there's loads of free resources out there. The plug for, you know, the Business Network, the plug for Just Have a Think as a YouTube channel. I think if you're painting a room, just have that running in the background, pick up all sorts of stuff. There's loads of resources out there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I found as well finding some good people to follow on LinkedIn people who are pushing the envelope a bit, and where I can really learn from them and their take on pieces of news. I found some of the marketeers as well, experts in sustainability marketing, who pick apart maybe some of the claims that are out there from businesses. You know, I find it helpful because that's their area of expertise. You go, oh goodness, yes, I hadn't thought about it like that. Thank you. And thank you all for being so honest on that last question in particular. I am going to ask now if there's any questions from the floor, either in the room, or I know that Bex has got some questions from online. So over to you now for the questions.
Great. The first question from Jen was, you've spoken a lot about impact and influence. I'm curious to know what you have found to be the most successful way to influence behaviour change.
Brilliant question. Thank you, Jen. So over to the panel. What have you found to be the most effective way to influence behaviour change? And I'll ask, does anyone have an answer on the tip of their tongue for that?
I need to do what you say you're going to do. You know, it's like, if you're, you know, it comes down to integrity, doesn't it? I think if people really trust in what you're doing, and that's all about transparency, isn't it, as well? Because people are really questioning and looking, as they should now. And I think, if you can provide that information and that transparency, then I think that will encourage behavioural change.
I'd add to that, in terms of information, show people the impact of what they're doing, because it's a bit nebulous sometimes. None of us can picture a ton of carbon dioxide, and neither do we know when we've released one. So there's a book that I love, I'm giving to everybody for Christmas, especially my least eco friends. It's called How Bad Are Bananas, Mike Berners-Lee. And it's just a really accessible guide to, if you're going to buy a leg of lamb, or if you're going to buy a new pair of jeans, or if you're going to change your car or book a flight, this is the impact it'll have, and these are the choices you might choose to make instead. So it makes it real to people, gives the idea of a carbon budget in your year. How are you going to burn it all off? Are you going to book one flight, or are you going to eat meat occasionally, or all sorts of different things you can balance up? And when we start talking, and the businesses that I work with, when we start saying, well, actually, the way that your team are commuting to work has this much of an impact, that's the equivalent of something tangible. They go, oh God, I didn't know that was going to be so big. Right, now I as an individual, I realize the impact I'm having. So instead of feeling, back to the overwhelm, it's too big a problem, it sort of flips that on its head and said, well, actually, this is the impact I'm having, and I can halve that by making these choices. So give people the information, make it real to them, make it feel accessible. And then they're going to want to make those changes that you want them to make anyway. Otherwise, it just feels like too big a problem to fix, or what can I do, is what everybody always feels.
What about you, Seb? And one of my specific sort of question for you of this is you're persuading people to move to money. How do you get them comfortable with that?
So I mean, just the long-term logic of it. I suppose in individual behaviours, it's not that hard, because you can show the evidence of long-term performance, and you can understand the risks of being in, do you want your money in an industry that will have to be shut down at some point in the future? Will you be smart enough to get out in the right time? Wouldn't you rather be invested in the things that we're going to have to grow to replace those things? So that's a long-term logic. It's actually quite easy to do. I'm far less interested in changing people's behaviour as I am in changing the systems in which people live and operate. So for me, the system is the system of financial planning that is allocating the capital. So how can we change that system? And the individual financial advisor is probably one of the most impactful businesses, certainly small businesses out there in the world. So how can we undermine the suitability of an investment strategy that's investing for a 4-degree C world? And we do that by trying to promote best practice, but then also have those conversations with our professional bodies, with our regulators, saying, you've already got a law that says financial advisors must try and avoid foreseeable harm. What could be more foreseeable than climate breakdown and the investment consequences of that? You've already got a rule that says people must make informed choice. That's all in Consumer Duty. Well, how can people make informed choice if the financial planning software and assumptions that advisors are using are just rhyming the past into the future and saying the future is going to look exactly the same as the past? It's not scientifically valid. So if I focus on trying to win individual customers, then I will have an impact that is reasonably large. If I focus on trying to change the systems upon which our industry operates, then the scale of change is potentially enormous. And that's despite us being a really tiny company.
Yeah, I talk about systems quite a lot in terms of, people en masse are going to take the easy option. You think of a river flowing downhill, and actually you can change the barriers in the river to reroute it. The water will flow in that different direction.
Yep.
Only offer people, low carbon food options in the canteen, or make it very hard for them to, have to reach up high to get the less good options, or whatever it is. Make it really easy for people to to cycle or walk to work, don't, you know, have an office which people have to drive to. You know, all of these things make it super easy so that then it's difficult to make the less good choice. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got another one online if you'd like.
Yeah.
So this is from Andrew. It would be good to hear from, to get the others' thoughts, how they think technology will play a part in changing businesses for the future.
Great question. Thank you, Andrew. So how do you think technology is going to help change businesses for the better?
That's a huge question.
Who's taking that one?
For us. I mean, I could talk about, like, in the context of what we do, we're looking at technology in a different sense, and we're looking at material science. So we recognise through our impact assessment that water was one of the biggest problems, because we're obviously shipping water. Our products contain water, as do most cleaning products. So we've been working with Nopla to develop seaweed sachets, basically, to do concentrated powder formulations. So, you know, there's so much exciting you know, technology going on in that kind of space, you know, looking at plastic alternatives. So we think that's huge, because that, you know, without people like that doing developments in material science, we couldn't move forward. But yeah, that's one area that we're excited about.
I'll talk about data briefly, because lots of companies are now trying their hardest to do an accurate footprint, looking at what the impact is across their whole value chain. And there's a real lack of data, and we need better technology to map movement of materials and the traceability of better quality materials, and that's lacking a bit at the moment. So we've got some crude tools, but they make a lot of assumptions. We need a step change in the quality of that, so that you can choose a different supplier and you can materially know the improvement that's made to your impact. And so I don't know if is that technology. We've probably built the systems, but we've not populated them well enough with the data, in my opinion.
Thank you, Shelley.
So technology is going to be incredibly transformational about everything that we do. But you give a human a tool, somebody will use it to build something nice, and somebody else will use it to build a weapon. So how we use these technologies is going to be the really defining thing. We've got all the technologies we need to solve the problem. We just need to scale them and fund them properly. It's not that we're waiting on some kind of new magical future that's going to solve all this. It's all there. We just need to put the real effort and money behind growing and scaling them. And then we need to think about, well, what are the controls around the edge of that, and how do we stop the people that will want to weaponize them, and how do we encourage the people that are going to put them towards the common good? I mean, we've seen a massive concentration of money, power, capital, and carbon footprint in a tiny number of people. It's going to be far better, well, unless you happen to be in that tiny number of people, it's going to be far better if we can work out how we distribute that wealth more widely across society, spread it out a bit more evenly. Technology has the potential to increasingly focus things, you know, so that only the owners of that technology feel the benefit from it. So technology is going to be hugely changeable, but the regulation around it is going to be absolutely key.
Thank you. Very thought-provoking question. We could do a whole session on that one. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's often a scale of people willing to engage in sustainability. And sometimes you have people who are just want sustainable items or sustainable business health or whatever that might be, and just don't know how. And then you have the other end where they will do any excuse to avoid, it's almost like they're actively against sustainability for whatever reason. On that scale, who do you think is the most impactful to engage, and what are the challenges that you have to overcome when you engage them?
Great question. So we've got a spectrum of people. To repeat the question, we've got a spectrum of people. We've got, you know, the people who are super engaged, really want to be sustainable, people who are maybe
climate change deniers, don't want to do anything, really against making changes. Who on that scale should we be influencing to have the greatest impact?
I'm happy to start.
Yeah.
I'll try that one. I would start with the people who want to hear your message, because let's get more momentum. There is clearly huge momentum, but in terms of the adoption curves, as soon as you've got to kind of 20-25% participation in anything, you get critical mass and it snowballs from there. So put quite a lot of effort in that. But when you inevitably hit a few people, and maybe it's your bank manager, we've talked about banks, mustn't slam them all the time. But if you hit somebody who really doesn't want to hear your message, you'd always say, well, what are their hot buttons? What do they want to hear about? And it's normally their bottom line. And if you can then talk about energy savings, it's the basic, that's where every business starts, by whether it's solar panels or whatever it is. That may not be the end goal, but it's a great place to start. And they immediately see business benefits. And then they go from seeing sustainability as somebody else's problem to, oh, actually, maybe there's something in this for me. And so you turn them onto it that way, and then start eroding their barriers that way, I find. There'll always be a small number, and you're probably wasting your time on them. But I think most people, you can, whether it's about painting a future, as you said, a future that, do you really want to live like that? Or it's about saying you have a bigger impact than you think you have, so don't be so resistant, you can do something about it. Or it's just hitting them in their wallet saying, there's savings to be made. You can do it that way.
Yeah, the Office for National Statistics ran, they run a lifestyle and opinion survey, and they've done some very good and broad research on people's attitudes towards climate change. And the headline figures are 75% of the population is worried or very worried about climate change. 40% of the population have experienced climate anxiety in the last month. 10% of those severe climate anxiety. The other 60% presumably aren't very scientifically literate because they should be scared. It's appropriate to be scared. It should motivate you to act. When you dig down into the fine details of that survey, you'll find that the people that are actively climate deniers are a fraction of the population. You're talking sub 2%. They're a very vocal and they're a very well-funded population. There's lots of bots that are parroting messages that they're not real people, they're just Russian bots, presumably. So I would say largely ignore those people and get on with the change itself. It's not just the Office for National Statistics. The Financial Conduct Authority runs the Financial Lives Survey. They go out and they interview 15,000 people each time. They've repeated the survey twice, and very consistent numbers are coming back. 75% of people expect their money to be doing good and avoiding harm. I think that probably reads across for purchasing decisions generally. That's been repeated a couple of times. Yet as an industry, as a financial advice industry, about 8 to 10% of fund flows are going towards those funds that match that definition. So that's a problem for the regulator. If they see every time we go out and ask the population, 75% of people are saying we want to be doing good, 8 to 10% of people are getting it, there's a massive call for a thematic review there. So that's if I was trying to persuade a climate laggard financial advisor, and there are a lot of those out there, I'd be saying, look, you've got a problem because you're not delivering what your customers want. And at some point, the regulator is going to run a thematic review, and that's going to be a massive business risk to you. So you can make a business argument for it, but just don't give these people the airtime and the credit that they want. There's a lot of very silly things that people say. I met somebody, a very credible person, who the other day said, I'm not sure I believe in anthropogenic climate change, these rising temperatures, it's all the heat island effect. You measure it with satellites. It's not the heat island effect. Scientists know about this stuff. So just dismiss, move on, concentrate on the 98% of people that will want to try and do some good. That's a fairly decent business strategy, isn't it? Shall I focus on the 2% over here that are all slightly questionable?
What about you, Phill?
Yeah, I mean, there is a kind of perverse desire to want to change their mind there, right? Because it's more satisfying. Whereas if you're concentrating on those that already understand the problem, you're in danger of feeling like you're operating in an echo chamber. But you have to persist. You have to believe that you're doing the right thing, because you are. So yeah, I agree completely with what these guys said.
Thank you. We have run out of time for questions. These are great questions, so thank you. It's been a fabulous conversation. I've really enjoyed it. We have covered all sorts, from perfection over progress, how to access finance, asking lots of questions, not taking no for an answer from suppliers, integrity, value, what do we mean by value, building networks where you can get advice, reaching out to people in parallel industries who are tackling similar problems. So much richness in what you've all shared today, so thank you very much. I would like to ask you just one final quick fire question. What is the first step that you would recommend other business leaders to take if they're getting going on their sustainability journey? What's the first thing they should do? Seb.
Imagine the low carbon, nature positive economy of the future and ask yourself, does your business have a place in it or not? And if the answer is not, what do you need to change so that it can?
Thank you.
Look closely at your value chain and ask yourself what harm you're currently doing and what good you can do in the future, because that gives you a really clear place to start.
I say focus on why as much as the how. You start.
Brilliant. What fantastic pieces of advice. Thank you, everybody, and thank you all of you for joining us for our first fireside chat. Hopefully the first of many, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.